Hey there and welcome to MurderTube. So for today's case, I'm going to do a little warning first. Our videos are of course about true crime, murders, serial killers, and we talk about some things that some people may find disturbing at times. This video is no different, but please be aware that the jury for this case had to have therapy after they heard the details of this case and saw some of the pictures of what had happened. This case may have some details that some viewers may find more disturbing than some of the usual videos. So with that warning in mind, let's dive into the torture and murder of Kelly Ann Bates. Kelly Ann Bates was born in Manchester, England in the year of 1979. She was close to her family and was described as a strong and sporty girl. She dreamed of becoming a teacher, but she never had the chance to live out her dream. When Kelly was 14 years old, she finished her babysitting job, and a friend of the child's parents offered to walk her home. This man was James Patterson Smith. James Smith was born in 1948. His neighbors described him as house-proud and well-groomed, and he never smoked and never drank alcohol. He was married for 10 years, until his wife would finally leave him in 1980 due to him being violently abusive to her. He would then date a 20-year-old girl called Tina Watson. This relationship would end just 2 years later, due to James using Tina as a punching bag. James would abuse and attack Tina even while she was pregnant. After James tried to drown Tina in the bathtub, she was finally able to leave the abusive relationship. But James's predatory and abusive relationships would not end there. That same year, in 1982, he began a relationship with Wendy Mothershead, who was just 15 years old at the time. Like the other relationships, it would be abusive, and James even tried to drown Wendy in the kitchen sink. So it was in 1993 when James and Kelly would meet when she finished her babysitting for the night. The 44-year-old man began grooming the 14-year-old child, and they would have a secret relationship. 2 years later, when 16-year-old Kelly finished school, she moved into James's house in Gorton, Manchester. Kelly did not tell her parents that James was 30 years older than her. James was unemployed, so it was up to Kelly to work part-time while she also took college classes. When Kelly's parents finally met James while at his house, they were shocked at how old he was. Kelly's mom immediately had a bad feeling about James. Her parents would carefully try to get Kelly away from James, but they were worried that if they pushed too hard, it would make Kelly want to be with him even more. For a brief time, Kelly and James did split up due to some arguments, and Kelly did return home to her parents. Her parents noticed bruises on Kelly's body, but she was adamant that they were just the result of an accident. She would ultimately return to living with James. Around Christmas of 1995, it appeared that Kelly was becoming more withdrawn. She resigned from her part-time job, and she would not contact her parents as often as she used to. A few months later, in March of 1996, Kelly's parents received a card for their anniversary and a card for her dad's birthday. These cards were only written by James. Kelly's brother went to go see her, but James told him that she was not home. Knowing something was not right, Kelly's mum tried speaking with Child Protective Services, but because Kelly was 17, she was not considered a child, and they could not be of any help. She also asked the police for help, but because there had been no reports of any of James's previous abusive behavior, he had no criminal record. And there was no evidence of abusive behavior now, just some speculation, so there was very little that the police could do. The domestic violence unit gave Kelly's mom some information to pass on to Kelly, helping her to identify signs of abuse and ways to seek help. Her mum never got the chance to give Kelly the information. Just the next month, on the 17th of April, 1996, James Smith went to the police station, saying he had killed his girlfriend. James told police that the couple got into an argument in the bathroom, and that he accidentally killed her because she inhaled water from the bath, that he tried CPR but he could not resuscitate her. When police arrived at the house, they found Kelly's naked dead body in the bedroom. Kelly's body, as well as every single room in the house, told of a horrific, gruesome torture. This crime shocked and sickened even the veteran police officers and medical examiners who had never seen something so traumatic as this. Kelly's blood was found in every room in the house, and the examination of her body showed that for the last 4 weeks of her life, she suffered over 150 separate injuries. James was always an abusive man to his partners, and Kelly had suffered some of that abuse throughout their entire relationship. But the last 4 weeks went way beyond domestic abuse and into the realms of a sick and twisted torture. James would continue to beat her severely, leaving bruises all over her body, as well as a fractured arm. She lost over 40 pounds in weight due to being starved, and for the last week of her life, she received no water. She was kept tied up, either by her hair tied to radiators, or sometimes with a ligature around her neck. He used boiling hot water to scald her buttocks and her left leg. He used a hot cloves iron to burn her thighs. He would use forks, knives, and scissors to stab her. And then he would use spades and pruning shears to stab her. He would force her mouth open and stab her inside her mouth. Both of her hands had been crushed. Her ears, nose, mouth, lips, and genitalia had all been mutilated. He had begun to partially scalp her. And somewhere between 1 week and 3 weeks before she died, James gouged out both of her eyes. In the following weeks, he would stab her empty eye sockets. Kelly was kept alive and tied up for all of this torture and mutilation. Finally, James drowned Kelly in the bathtub, and then used the shower head to beat her in the head. The medical examiner said, "In my career, I have examined over 600 victims of homicide, but I have never come across injuries so extensive." And even though it would have been obvious that this was not just an accidental drowning, James still denied murder and would plead not guilty. He claimed Kelly would injure herself to try and make him look bad. And when asked why he gouged out her eyes, he said that she had dared him to do it. A psychiatrist told the court that James had a severe paranoid disorder with morbid jealousy, and that he lived in a distorted reality. The prosecutor detailed the case as, it was as if he deliberately disfigured her, causing her the utmost pain, distress, and degradation. The injuries were not the result of one sudden eruption of violence. They must have been caused over a long period and were so extensive and so terrible that the defendant must have deliberately and systematically tortured the girl. Her death must have been a merciful end to her torment. It took the jury just 1 hour to reach a verdict: guilty. James was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum of 20 years being served. He is eligible for parole now, although I find it very unlikely that any parole board will ever release this man. Due to the horrific details of the torture of Kelly, as well as the pictures they were shown, the members of the jury received professional counseling after the trial was over. This 17-year-old child suffered one of the most agonizing ends I've ever heard of, and I can't even begin to imagine the pain she went through. But I feel that it is important for people to know this case, as people like James still live among us, and unfortunately domestic abuse can be very common all over the world. Domestic abuse is never the victim's fault, although they are often led to believe it is. There is never an excuse for someone to mentally or physically abuse their partner, regardless of genders or sexuality. If your partner has ever abused you, or you believe someone you know might be getting abused, please check out the wiki link in the description that has resources and websites for wherever you are located in the world. There is always help available, and you deserve that help. Domestic abuse is never a one-time thing. Someone that has assaulted a partner will do it again. It's a scary world out there, so stay safe.